Hello, Eugen. Welcome back to week 4 of environment sketching. Looking at this, you kind of commented that I was feeling a little stiff, and part of that is because you have so many perfectly straight lines everywhere. We're losing some of that organic quality in our sketching. So, when you're doing things like setting up your compositions and stuff like that, really think about how can you get the big shape first, but then once you start to design and add those little details in there, how can you create little tiny details that will help kind of sell the idea of what we have without relying too much on just perfectly straight lines. So, for example, if I have this rooftop that you've got there, right? Let's say this shape. Don't be afraid to add a little bit of crookedness or wonkiness into it or asymmetry, especially like as we're designing these little details here. Notice I'm just kind of freehanding the whole thing. And then when I start to build in the little tiles and stuff like that, I'm not going to put it all over the place. I'm just going to put it in a couple of key spots just to kind of show the little details. I'm going to let it be fairly loose. And then the other thing is when I design uh, my thicker line weights on the outside, it's okay to come in and add a little bit of variation from these pieces. Like I'm still trying to keep those shapes simplified, but I'm thinking about all the individual tiles and stuff like that as well. So you can see just adding a little bit of that gives it some more character, and then making sure that some of these chimneys and things like that are not perfectly lined up. And that will help you quite a bit, I think, in making things have a lot more character, not just always relying upon things to be perfectly straight, but just adding a little bit of character and personality to it. And then also not being so thick with the line weight all the way around. So you notice here that this line weight, I'm letting it be very thin compared to the exterior. And that way I'm more concerned with the silhouette of the shapes rather than the actual interior of the object that I'm drawing. In this case, let's say the chimney, right? So I can go ahead and just build up some of those little details, and you can kind of see I'm not trying to draw the line all the way down here. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but it's more about creating that sense of kind of organicness and having fun with some of the shapes through there, and that will help you, I think, get rid of that stiff quality to your drawings. Is letting your arm freehand some of that stuff and not being afraid to have it go away from just a perfectly straight line. The same thing with the windows and things like that. You can design these buildings in the distance, kind of using some of your shape language. I mean, they should kind of line up, but at the same time, they don't have to be perfect, right? Especially far away, you just want to add a little bit of character to things, and don't be afraid to have things break the silhouette a little bit too, so that when I have my roof here, I don't have it necessarily just kind of lined up perfectly. There's a little bit of a thickness through there, so that when I draw it in, there's going to be a little bit of an overhang right through here, right? So you kind of see as I kind of build this in here, having some fun with the design and the shapes and even the just the general line weights and stuff like that. Now, this I wouldn't go too far because it's all the way in the distance, but I just wanted to show you different things that you could do to kind of loosen some of this stuff up. And also back here, I wouldn't get caught up in some of these details. At this distance, you're going to have to rely upon kind of the silhouette of the building, any interesting shapes that you might have here, and that's going to help you kind of design a more interesting background. We don't want to have like every single tile in there. It just creates too much noise. So back here, you could probably get away with just some simple shapes more than anything else. If you had some major trim pieces, you could put those in there, something that you might expect to see from far away, but I wouldn't add every single line. You may just have some lines like this, but again, don't make it so perfectly straight. Otherwise, it just becomes a lot of noise. And then you have to evaluate it with some of the other buildings behind it where you wouldn't have all that detail, especially like the castle and stuff like that. And then like this castle, if you want this to be kind of a focal point or an area of interest, I would, make it bigger in the distance. Right now, it's just so hidden down here that you really don't see it. So kind of consider that as well as you're drawing these things. Just not so much thick line weight on the interior of things, not so much pure repetitiveness and crisp, clean lines. Be a little bit more loose by freehanding some of these lines as well. And then you don't have to draw every single tile or shingle, especially as you get farther away. You want to give this drawing a little bit more room to breathe. Right now, there's just so much detail everywhere that it's very convoluted and busy. You should have more detail towards the front, but you should still simplify things. So, like this building here, I would just get rid of it. There's no reason to have two buildings here in the foreground. I would just have one, and maybe even get rid of this one because we've got this building here in the foreground. There's no need for a second and a third one. Just let this one be, more of a foreground building. And then your perspective feels a little off. So I would double check your perspective here, because if we're looking down on everything, let's say this is the underside, that means our horizon line is out here somewhere. Then that means that this, depending on the tilt on it, it feels like it's falling over, right? So figure out where your horizon line is, and then make sure that these lines are going to that same vanishing point. And if you're trying to do a different perspective system, like maybe it's a corner or something like that, then it has to be very explicit that it's not the same. If you keep a vanishing point too close to this other one, then we're going to be confused. So we want to have a little bit of logic in our drawing. And I actually think this line right here is the one that's off, because we could have this one going back, and let's say there's another line coming out here, but this feels like it's not even going to converge somewhere else. This one has to converge out here. That this one has to also feel like it's converging into the distance. So there's some perspective issues, and even this one looks like it's going off into a different direction. So double check your perspective. Don't just throw buildings together. Things are going to look off, especially this, like here, you can see this is going in a different direction. I would get those things working first. The bus itself, I'm not too concerned with, because it's easier to redesign. Ask yourself if you need wheels. Like, what is this? This is just like a bus with wings right now. Ask yourself, what's the actual design for this vehicle? What's the time period? What's the culture? What's the technology? Don't just put a set of wings on an actual school bus right now, because that doesn't feel believable, right? We kind of have to make sense of this design. And if you're not sure about what this design is, then this is where you would have to do silhouette studies and design this bus separately. Don't design it in this image right now, because you're probably not at that skill level yet, but design this bus separately. Do the silhouette studies and do some sketches of what this bus might look like, and really think about the level of technology and the shapes that you would use. Right now, these shapes still feel a little generic. They still feel like your typical rectangular houses with triangular rooftops, and that doesn't really tell me anything about the culture or the world that you're trying to build. So I think ease up on the details, think more about the big picture and the story and the setting. Think more about the world that you're building, and try to get some of those shapes into your designs as well, so that it feels more specific to your world, your culture, your level of technology, and less about just drawing something to be on the page. Okay. So let me know if you have any other questions. Take another pass at this. And if not, if you don't have any more questions, I'll just talk to you next week.